Why was the power flickering again? The outpost had been running on backup generators for weeks, but this time the lights didn't just dim, they trembled. Every hum, every flicker felt like a heartbeat about to stop. And in that silence between pulses, she felt it, the weight of being alone. She leaned her hand against the cold metal wall of the command room. The steel vibrated faintly, like it remembered every shell that had landed nearby, every scream that had once filled these halls. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. It wasn't the dark she feared, it was what came with it. Outside, the mountains swallowed sound. Snow drifted in pale ribbons across ridges that seemed endless, unbroken. Somewhere out there, shadows were moving, men who had studied the outpost's weakness for months. She didn't need the maps to know it. She could feel it in her chest, like a storm waiting. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The radio crackled, a voice broken by static muttered coordinates. She adjusted the dial, but the interference only grew louder. She frowned, pressing the earpiece tighter, listening for anything human in the noise. Nothing, only fragments. The line died. And then the lights went out. Total silence. Her own breathing was the only sound in the room. She tapped the flashlight strapped to her shoulder. A beam cut through the dark, narrow, trembling, catching dust in the air. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of what the dark reminded her of. A cellar half a world away where she had hidden once when she was still a girl, listening to boots upstairs, praying they wouldn't find her family. She shook her head hard. That was years ago, different war, different enemies. She had sworn she would never be powerless again. That was why she was here. But she wasn't supposed to be here alone. Her team had been rotated out, supply lines cut, reinforcements delayed, and in the shuffle of bureaucracy she had slipped through the cracks, or maybe they had just let her. She had never been the favorite, never the one people listened to first. Even at the briefing tables she could feel it, eyes that skimmed past her, voices that rose over hers. Good soldier, they would say with polite smiles, but never essential, never indispensable. And maybe they were right, maybe she was. Her hand hovered over the old photograph taped to the edge of the console. A girl, dark hair in braids, holding a paper kite against a pale sky. The corners of the photo were worn, smudged from her fingers. She looked at it longer than she meant to, then tucked it back under the radio. She couldn't afford to linger. Because the mountain wind had shifted. She could hear it now, faint, low, carrying something unnatural. A rhythm, footsteps. She moved to the observation slit, pressing her eye against the cold steel edge. Nothing but snow, glowing faintly under a pale moon. Her breath fogged the glass. She blinked, focused again. The wind howled. And then there, a shadow that didn't belong, then another. They moved low, deliberate, not patrols, not random, hunters. Her chest tightened. She stepped back, reaching for her rifle. The familiar weight steadied her, cold steel pressing against her palms like an anchor. She adjusted the scope, checked the chamber. Movements automatic. She had done this 1,000 times in training, 100 times in combat. But training never carried the silence that this did. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She could fire. She could break the silence now. But she hesitated. Why? Because she wasn't sure anymore if her orders were to hold or to survive. The last transmission she had received had been cut off halfway, words she still replayed in her head. Hold until, and then nothing. Was it reinforcements, extraction, or something else? The difference meant everything. She lowered the rifle slowly. Not yet. The radio hissed again, faint, almost mocking. She turned the dial. A fragment of a voice returned. Not make it, more static. Then silence. She slammed her fist against the console, the sound echoing across the empty command room. She closed her eyes, letting the silence press in. This wasn't just another mission. She had known it the moment she volunteered. And she had volunteered for reasons no one else understood. They thought she was just filling a rotation. They didn't know about the letter she had hidden in her pack. They didn't know about the boy she had promised she would find answers for. Not yet. The footsteps outside grew clearer now. She turned back to the observation slit. One of the shadows had broken away, creeping closer, testing. She exhaled, slow and steady, lowering herself into a shooter's stance. The scope caught his outline, blurred by snow but human. Her breath fogged the glass again. She held it, then squeezed. The recoil kicked against her shoulder. The echo cracked through the valley. The figure collapsed into the snow, silent, swallowed by the wind. For a moment nothing, then chaos. Shouts, movement, the rest of them breaking cover. She pulled back from the slit, reloading. Her heartbeat thudded against her ribs, each pulse louder than the last. She wasn't afraid, not exactly. It was something else. Something closer to relief. Because at least now, the waiting was over. The outpost was no longer silent. It had become a target. She pressed the transmit button on the radio. "This is Echo 7, outpost compromised, multiple hostiles approaching, requesting immediate." Static swallowed her voice. She closed her eyes. She wasn't sure if anyone had heard her. The walls around her shuddered as if they remembered. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Somewhere outside, mortars had been placed. She knew what was coming next. The first explosion shook the mountain. Snow slid from the ridges in heavy cascades, thundering down into the valley. The windows rattled. She gritted her teeth, bracing against the console. The second came closer. She ducked instinctively, feeling the pressure waves slam through the room. Her ears rang. The photograph fluttered to the ground. She grabbed it, crumpling the edges in her fist before shoving it back into her pocket. She whispered under her breath, almost too quiet to hear, "Not tonight. Not her, not this place." Her hand steadied on the rifle. She moved toward the main door, shoulders squared against the cold. She could hear her father's voice in her head again, calm, patient, from years ago, when she had first asked him why he never told war stories at home. Because, he had said, war isn't about stories, it's about silences, and the people who hold them. She stepped out into the night. Snow swirled around her boots. The valley stretched below, wide and treacherous. Figures moved like shadows in the storm, their shouts carried by the wind. She raised the rifle, took aim, and exhaled. And in that moment, in that silence between the flicker of light and the pull of a trigger, she became something else. Not a soldier they had ignored, not a name lost in rotation, but the flame that would not die. Why hadn't they pulled her out when they had the chance? That question gnawed at her as the snow swirled around her and the outpost walls groaned behind her. Reinforcements should have arrived days ago. A convoy, a helicopter, something. Instead, she was still here, standing against the wind, staring down shadows that multiplied with every gust of snow. She lowered her rifle just slightly and pressed her cheek against the icy stock. The sight fogged, cleared, fogged again. She blinked hard. Her breath was too loud, her heart louder. Movement, 3 silhouettes breaking into a sprint, cutting across the white expanse. She fired. The first fell, the second stumbled. The third kept running. She fired again, and this time silence. The snow buried them fast. By morning they would be gone, hidden by the same land they had tried to claim. But morning felt far away. She pulled back into the outpost, bolting the heavy door shut behind her. The lock clicked, metal against metal. For a moment the silence returned, heavy, pressing against her ears. She leaned against the door, closing her eyes. The image came back, the girl with the kite. She tried not to see it, but she couldn't stop herself. Her sister, 10 years younger, the one she had sworn she would protect. But she hadn't. She opened her eyes hard. The memory tried to speak, but she refused it. This wasn't the time, not yet. The radio hissed again. She lunged toward it, grabbing the handset. Echo 7 reading, "Do you copy?" Only static, then a burst. A voice faint, almost buried. "Hold position, do not." The line cut out. Her jaw tightened. Hold position. That was all she caught. Was that an order, a mistake? A ghost of a transmission? She didn't know, but she obeyed, not because of trust, because of stubbornness. She looked around the command room, maps curled at the corners, dust on old equipment, coffee rings staining metal desks. Everything felt abandoned, forgotten, like her. She checked her ammo, counted slowly. Not enough, never enough. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but underneath it she thought she heard something else. Voices, low, hushed. She held her breath, straining to listen. Then footsteps, closer this time. She raised her rifle, pointing it toward the door. The handle trembled just once. She froze. And then silence. She stayed still, finger tight on the trigger. One breath, two. The handle didn't move again. Whoever it was, they weren't reckless. They were testing her, waiting. Her hands shook, not from fear, from something heavier, the weight of being hunted. She forced her breathing steady. She had been here before. Not this place, not this mountain, but this moment, where silence became louder than gunfire, where waiting became the hardest battle. Her father's words came back again. War isn't about stories, it's about silences. But silence didn't feel noble tonight. It felt cruel. She lowered the rifle slightly, packing the room. Every creak of her boots echoed too loud. She wanted to scream just to hear something human, but she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she pulled the photograph from her pocket again. The edges were bent now, the ink fading. Her sister's smile stared back at her, unbroken, innocent. She touched the corner gently with her thumb. Her sister had wanted to be a doctor. She used to follow her around with notebooks, scribbling anatomy diagrams, asking questions no one had answers to. "What's it like when a heart stops?" she once asked. "Do you feel it?" She had laughed then, brushing it off. But the question haunted her now. Did you feel it in that last second, or was it just silence? She shoved the photograph back into her pocket, swallowing hard. She wasn't going to think about it. Not here. Not while the door trembled again, louder this time. The metal rang once, then stopped. She raised her rifle, finger pressed tight. The door shook again. And then came the voice. A man's voice, low, calm. "You don't have to die in there." Her stomach twisted. They spoke her language, fluently. Not the accent she expected. She froze, breath caught in her throat. The voice continued. "We know you're alone. We know you're running out of time." She stayed silent. The footsteps shifted outside. "Come out, and it doesn't have to end this way." Her grip tightened on the rifle. Every instinct screamed not to answer, but silence was unbearable. "If you knew me," she muttered under her breath, too quiet for them to hear, "you'd know I don't bargain." The voice called again. "You've been abandoned. They left you. Why stay loyal to people who don't care?" Her throat tightened, because they were right, at least partly. She had been forgotten, ignored, overlooked. She had seen it in every briefing, every rotation. And maybe if she surrendered now, no one would even notice. But she would. She lifted the rifle, pressed her back against the wall beside the door, and waited. Silence, then footsteps retreating. She exhaled slowly, realizing she had been holding her breath. Her hands trembled. She set the rifle down just for a second, pressing her palms against her face. Her heart raced too fast. She wanted to cry. She didn't, she couldn't. She sat against the wall, staring at the shadows the flashlight threw across the floor. Her mind wandered again, uninvited. Her sister. That last night before she deployed. The argument they never resolved. The words she wished she could take back. "I'll come back," she had said. "You always say that," her sister had replied. "This time I mean it." Her sister had turned away. "No, you don't. You just mean you'll survive, but surviving isn't the same as coming back." The memory pressed hard, like a bruise she couldn't stop touching. She rubbed her temples, trying to push it away. But she knew why it haunted her, because her sister was gone now, because she hadn't come back in time. And that was why she was here. The letter in her pack, folded, creased, worn thin, carried her sister's last words. A question, a plea, scratched in shaky handwriting. Find out why. She didn't even know what her sister had meant, but she knew she had to try. That was why she had volunteered for this rotation, why she had stayed silent when the others left, why she hadn't asked to be pulled out. She was waiting for something, an answer she couldn't name yet. The wind howled again, pulling her back to the present. She stood, rifle in hand. She couldn't let herself drown in memory. Not now. Not while the outpost walls shook again. A thud against the metal, then another. Louder, she braced herself. They weren't walking away this time. The first blast ripped through the doorframe, shaking the walls, showering sparks into the room. Smoke filled the air. She coughed, covering her mouth, eyes burning. The second blast followed, metal bending inward. She raised the rifle, heart pounding, ears ringing. Through the haze, shadows spilled into the room. 1, 2, 3. She fired, the first fell, the second staggered, the third lunged. She swung the rifle too slow. He crashed into her, driving her backward. The rifle skidded across the floor. She gasped, grappling in the smoke, boots sliding against debris. His weight pressed her down, hands clawing at her gear. She fought back, elbows, fists, teeth, every movement desperate, primal. She felt his breath against her ear, his voice muttering something she couldn't understand. Rage surged. She grabbed the knife from her belt, swinging blind. Contact, a grunt. His weight shifted, faltered. She shoved hard, rolling free, gasping for air. The smoke cleared just enough to see him collapse, knife buried deep. Her chest heaved. She stared at her hands, shaking, blood smeared across her fingers. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating. She staggered to her feet, retrieving the rifle. Her ears still rang from the blasts, her lungs burned, her eyes stung. She looked at the crumpled figure on the floor. She hadn't wanted it this way, but there was no other way. She whispered under her breath, words only she could hear. I'm sorry. The wind outside roared louder as if mocking her. The outpost groaned, walls scarred and broken. She stood in the wreckage, alone again but no longer untouched. Something inside her had shifted, something she couldn't name. And for the first time she wondered, not if she would survive this night, but if she wanted to. Why was the body still staring at her? The smoke had thinned, the echoes of the blasts had faded, yet the man's eyes were still open, glazed, lifeless, fixed on her as if demanding an answer she couldn't give. She crouched down slowly, hand trembling as she reached toward his face. Her fingers brushed cold skin. She forced his eyelids shut. The silence afterward pressed heavier than before. She stood, backing away, breathing hard. The rifle hung loose in her grip. She told herself she had done what she had to, that it was survival, nothing more, nothing less. But deep down, she knew it was never that simple. Her ears still rang, but gradually other sounds returned. The groan of the metal door half blown from its hinges, the hiss of the wind seeping through the cracks, and somewhere in the distance, faint but rising, the low thump of engines. She froze. Engines. She moved toward the observation slit, wiping soot from the glass with her sleeve. At first she saw only darkness and snow. Then headlights, a slow, crawling line winding through the valley below. Trucks. Too many. Her chest tightened, reinforcements but not hers. She stepped back, heart hammering. The outpost was already bleeding. The walls couldn't take another assault, and she couldn't take another night of waiting, of silence that never ended. Her hand brushed against her pocket, the photograph, the letter. Her sister's handwriting scratched into her mind. Find out why. She clenched her fist, then forced herself to breathe. She couldn't think about that now. She couldn't think about what she hadn't said, what she hadn't done. She needed to survive this night first. The radio crackled. She snapped toward it, lunging for the handset. Echo 7, do you copy? Outpost compromised. Hostiles inbound. Repeat, multiple vehicles armed. Static swallowed her voice, then a whisper of sound, "Hold position reinforcements." The line cut again. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to smash the radio into the wall, to scream into the silence, but she didn't. Instead, she lowered the handset slowly, her hand trembling. She couldn't trust it, not anymore. The headlights grew brighter, closer. She turned back to the shattered door. The outpost was no longer shelter. It was a trap. And she was done waiting. She slung the rifle over her shoulder, grabbed her pack, checked her ammo again. Not enough, but enough to move. She strapped the knife back to her belt, tugged the straps of her vest tight, every movement steady, deliberate. Then she stopped. Her eyes fell to the man's body still sprawled on the floor. His blood had spread across the concrete, dark, thick, seeping into cracks. She stared at him too long, and the thought came again, unwanted, heavy. He had a family, too. She knelt down, pressing her hand against the pocket of his jacket. She hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside, a wallet, worn leather. She flipped it open with trembling hands. Photographs. A woman, 2 children. Her chest tightened until it hurt. She stared at their faces, smiling, unaware. For a moment, the world tilted. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. She wasn't supposed to see them. He wasn't supposed to follow her into memory. She shoved the wallet back into his pocket, too hard, almost angrily. Then she stood and forced herself to look away. The engines outside rumbled louder. The trucks were close now. She moved toward the door, rifle ready. The wind cut into her as soon as she stepped outside, biting her skin, stinging her eyes. The snow swirled around her, almost blinding. She crouched low, moving along the outer wall. Her boots crunched softly against the ice. Every sound felt too loud, every breath too sharp. The trucks slowed, engines growling against the incline. Figures jumped down into the snow, their shapes blurred in the storm. She counted at least a dozen, maybe more, too many. She pressed her back against the cold wall, eyes closed. She couldn't fight them all. Not head-on, not even close. But she didn't need to. She only needed to last. She whispered under her breath, words her father had once said when teaching her to hold a rifle steady. 1 shot at a time. That's all it takes. She exhaled slowly, then lifted the rifle. Through the scope the world narrowed, the storm blurred at the edges. All she saw was one figure moving between headlights. She squeezed. The shot cracked through the valley. The man dropped. Shouts, chaos, figures scattering, dropping into the snow, searching for the source. She fired again. Another fell. The trucks roared, headlights swinging, beams slicing through the storm. She ducked, pressing herself low against the wall. Bullets tore through the snow above her, sparks jumping from the outpost's metal walls. She crawled forward, dragging her pack, rifle clutched tight. Every breath scraped her throat raw. Every bullet screamed past her ears. Then silence again, not empty, waiting. She crouched, pressed her back against the wall, heart hammering. Her hands shook against the rifle. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to steady. And that's when the memory broke through again. Her sister's last words. Surviving isn't the same as coming back. Her throat burned. She had promised, and promises weighed heavier than bullets. She opened her eyes, steady now. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide, not tonight. The shouts rose again. Shadows moved closer through the snow. She raised the rifle, finger steady on the trigger. The storm howled, the trucks roared. And she fired. The battle blurred into fragments, snow exploding in sprays, sparks from ricochets, shouts swallowed by wind. Her body moved without thought, each shot automatic, each movement survival. But exhaustion crept fast. Her arms ached, her lungs burned, her vision blurred at the edges. And then silence again. She blinked, squinting through the storm. The headlights had gone dark, the engines silent, the valley empty. She lowered the rifle slowly, breath heaving. Were they gone? Or were they waiting? She staggered back toward the outpost, boots dragging through snow, body trembling from cold and exhaustion. She shoved the broken door aside and stumbled inside. The warmth, faint as it was, hit her like a wave. She sank to the floor, back against the wall, rifle across her lap. Her chest heaved, every breath ragged. The silence returned, thick, heavy. She tilted her head back, eyes closed. For a moment she let herself imagine she was somewhere else. A kitchen, a warm light overhead, her sister sitting across from her, notebooks open, asking questions, laughing. Her eyes burned. She pressed her palms against them, forcing the image away. She was here, she was alone, and the night wasn't over. The wind howled outside, rattling the walls. The outpost groaned like an old ship in a storm. She lifted her head slowly, staring at the cracked ceiling. And for the first time, she wondered if this mountain was where her story was meant to end. But then she felt the photograph in her pocket, pressed against her chest. The paper, soft and worn, grounding her. She wasn't done yet. Not until she knew. Not until she answered the question her sister had left behind. Her eyes narrowed, steady now, even as exhaustion weighed heavy. She whispered into the silence, voice rough but certain. "Not yet." The wind answered with a howl, carrying the promise of another fight. And she knew the night had only just begun. Why wouldn't her hands stop shaking? The rifle lay across her lap, metal cold against her skin, but her grip trembled as if it no longer belonged to her. She flexed her fingers slowly, watching the faint tremor in the dim light. Was it cold, adrenaline, or something deeper, the slow unraveling of a body pushed too far? She pulled her gloves tighter, forcing the shaking still. She couldn't afford weakness now, not when the silence pressed this heavy. The storm outside had grown louder, swallowing the valley whole. Snow slammed against the walls like fists, rattling the windows until glass cracked at the edges. The outpost felt smaller now, its walls bending, its foundations groaning. She tilted her head back, closing her eyes. The sound of the storm seeped into her chest, steady, relentless, reminding her of another night years ago when the bombs had fallen without warning. She had been a child then, hiding beneath a wooden table as the roof cracked above her. Her sister had clutched her hand so tightly it hurt. "Don't move," her father had whispered. "But they'll find us," she had whispered back. "That's not the point," he said. "The point is we don't move first." She opened her eyes again, breath shaky. That night had never left her. It clung to her even now, decades later, in a different country, in a different war. The radio crackled again. She turned her head slowly, staring at it as if it might betray her one more time. She picked up the handset, pressing it to her ear. Echo 7. The voice was faint, broken by static, male, unfamiliar. "Hold out, not much longer." Her lips parted. "This is Echo 7, confirm coordinates, confirm." The line died. She stared at the radio for a long moment, her hand still clutching the handset. Then she set it down gently, almost reverently, as though it were something fragile. Not much longer. Was that a promise or a warning? She stood, packing the room. Every step echoed against concrete, too loud, too final. She ran her hand along the scarred wall, fingertips brushing bullet holes from battles past. How many had died here before her? How many had sat in this same silence, waiting for something that never came? The storm roared louder, drowning out her thoughts. She moved to the observation slit, squinting through the blur of snow. At first, nothing, just white chaos. Then movement. Not headlights this time. Torches. Flickering flames cutting through the storm, bobbing like fireflies in the valley below. Her throat tightened. They were advancing differently now. Not machines, not engines, human, slow, deliberate. She pressed her eye closer to the slit. Through the haze she counted at least 20, maybe more. The flames wove closer, each step synchronized, patient. They weren't rushing, they weren't afraid. They knew she was only one. She stepped back, breathing fast, 20 against 1. The math was merciless. Her gaze drifted to the photograph again, still tucked under the edge of the console. She pulled it free, staring at her sister's smile. For a moment her chest ached so sharp it felt like breaking. She whispered into the silence, voice barely audible, "What would you have done?" The photograph had no answer, just the same innocent eyes, unbroken by war. She shoved it back into her pocket, squaring her shoulders. She couldn't think about answers, not now, only choices. Her boots scraped against the floor as she crossed to the ammo crate. She counted again. Bullets lined neatly, far too few. She closed her eyes, calculating, dividing. Not enough for 20, not even close. She loaded anyway. 1 magazine, 2. Hands steady now, the shaking gone. Each click of metal against metal louder than the storm outside. She whispered her father's words again like a prayer. 1 shot at a time. The torches grew closer, their glow flickering against the snow-streaked glass. Shadows danced across the walls of the outpost. She crouched low, rifle tight against her shoulder, breath steady. The storm howled, rattling the windows, shaking the walls. Her heartbeat slowed. The first figure broke through the snow, flame flickering against his mask. She fired. He dropped. Shouts, chaos. The torches swayed, scattered, then regrouped. Another figure advanced. She fired again. The storm swallowed the echoes, but she heard their cries, faint, human, too human. Her chest tightened with every pull of the trigger. She forced herself not to think about faces, not to think about families, only shadows, only threats. 1 shot at a time. The torches faltered, retreating slightly, flickering against the snow. She exhaled, lowering the rifle for just a second. And then the sound came. A low, distant thud, followed by another and another. Mortars. Her eyes widened. She scrambled back from the observation slit just as the first blast hit outside. The ground shook, the ceiling groaned, dust rained from above. She staggered, covering her head. The second blast struck closer, shaking the walls until cracks split the concrete. Her ears rang. The air filled with smoke and dust. She coughed, stumbling toward the console. The photograph slipped from her pocket, fluttering to the floor. She dropped to her knees, fingers grasping for it desperately. The paper bent under her grip, edges tearing slightly. She pressed it against her chest, heart pounding. The third blast struck. The outpost screamed, metal tearing, concrete splitting. She was thrown against the wall, head cracking hard. Darkness flickered at the edges of her vision. She gasped, clutching the photograph tighter, refusing to let go. When the dust settled, she lay still, chest heaving. The walls around her were cracked, broken, the air thick with smoke. Her head throbbed, her arms shook, but she was alive. She pushed herself up slowly, vision blurred, ears ringing. The torches outside burned brighter now, closer. They were coming. She staggered to her feet, rifle in hand, blood running warm down the side of her face. Every muscle ached, every breath sharp, but her eyes were steady. She looked at the cracked wall, the broken door, the shattered room. This outpost was finished. It would not last another hour. But she would. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the photograph's edges dig into her skin. She whispered into the smoke, voice rough but steady. Not yet. The torches advanced again. The storm howled. The walls trembled. And she stood ready, the flame that would not die. The world tasted of smoke. She coughed, lungs burning, as the air clawed down her throat. Every inhale carried dust. Every exhale scraped her chest raw. The outpost groaned above her, concrete sagging where it had once stood proud. She braced a trembling hand against the cracked wall, steadying herself as another tremor rattled through the floor. Her ears still rang. The mortars had left her head buzzing, every sound muffled, distorted, as though she was underwater. The storm's howl outside became a dull roar, muted but relentless. Through the haze, she blinked at the room around her. Shattered consoles sparked faintly. A section of the ceiling had collapsed, scattering bricks and twisted metal across the floor. The once secure door now hung off its hinges, bent inward, its lock torn apart. The outpost was no longer a fortress. It was a tomb waiting to seal itself shut. Her knees nearly buckled as she staggered forward. Blood dripped warm down her temple, tracing her jaw, soaking the collar of her uniform. She pressed her palm against it, wincing at the sting. But she could still move, still breathe. That was enough. She crouched low, sweeping the floor until her fingers brushed the photograph. She lifted it carefully, brushing the dust from its surface. Her sister's smile stared back at her, bent and creased but unbroken. Unbroken. She tucked it back into her pocket and whispered, "Not while I stand." The torches outside burned brighter closer. Shadows stretched long across the snow, reaching for the broken outpost. They had seen the blasts. They knew she was hurt. They were coming. Her hand found the rifle again. The weight steadied her. She limped toward the shattered door, planting herself in the shadow of the frame. She raised the barrel, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the shifting glow beyond. The storm whipped harder, snow flurries spinning like knives in the wind. The flames swayed, weaving through the blizzard. Shapes emerged, dark outlines, hunched figures pressing forward slowly, carefully. They weren't rushing this time. They weren't reckless. They smelled blood. Her finger tightened on the trigger. She exhaled slowly, finding rhythm despite the ringing in her ears. The first shadow stepped close enough, she fired. The figure dropped. The torch tumbled into the snow, sputtering before extinguishing. Shouts rose in the valley, muffled by the storm. The shadows hesitated. She took another shot. Another figure collapsed, torch scattering sparks. The storm carried their voices away, but she could feel their anger, their confusion. Good, let them feel it. She pulled back behind the broken doorframe, heart hammering. She reloaded quickly, fingers moving almost on instinct now. But as she slid the magazine in place, her vision blurred. The blood loss, the exhaustion, it clawed at her, dragging her down. She shook her head hard, forcing her eyes to focus. She couldn't fade, not now. The torches regrouped, spreading wider. They weren't charging, they were circling, testing, probing. Her stomach twisted, they were learning. She fired again, but missed. The bullet whistled into the storm, vanishing in the white void. Her arms shook harder now, the weight of the rifle dragging them down. Her breath caught. If her body betrayed her now, it was over. She pressed her back against the wall, shutting her eyes tight. She whispered to herself, rough and desperate, "Stay awake, stay here, stay alive." The storm howled louder, pressing against the broken door, rattling what remained of the hinges. She opened her eyes again, scanning the valley. The torches flickered strangely now, some moving faster than others, darting through the snow like restless fireflies. For a moment, confusion cut through her exhaustion. Then she saw it. They weren't torches, not anymore. They were drones, small buzzing machines, each carrying a faint light beneath its body, weaving in erratic patterns. Her chest tightened. The enemy was flushing her out, using the drones to distract, to overwhelm. One swooped close, its light glaring against the snow. She fired, shattering it into sparks. Another replaced it instantly, zigzagging higher. She fired again, another burst of sparks, but more followed. 10, 15, a swarm. The sky above the valley glowed with flickering lights, weaving through the storm. The buzzing grew louder, closer, filling her ears, gnawing at her nerves. She fired again and again, shells clattering at her feet. Sparks fell like snowflakes, vanishing into the storm. But there were too many. For every drone she hit, two more appeared. Her rifle clicked empty. She froze. The buzzing grew louder, the swarm pressing closer, lights glaring through the snow until the world glowed with artificial fireflies. Her hands scrambled for another magazine. None left. She checked again, fingers frantic, but the crate was empty. Empty. Her chest heaved. No more bullets, only the storm, only the swarm. The buzzing grew deafening, drilling into her skull. She dropped the empty rifle, clenching her fists. Her eyes burned, tears mixing with blood and sweat. This was it. But then a sound. Faint at first, almost lost in the storm. A low, steady thump, rhythm cutting through the chaos. Her eyes widened, helicopter blades. She staggered to the broken doorway, staring into the storm. Through the haze, a dark shape loomed, rotors slicing the air. A spotlight cut through the snow, sweeping the valley. For a moment, disbelief froze her. Rescue. The drones faltered, scattering under the sudden glare. The torches retreated. Shouts rose, angry, panicked. The helicopter hovered closer, spotlight blinding, cutting through the storm. Her throat tightened. She stepped into the doorway, raising her arm, waving desperately. "Here," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Here." The spotlight swept over her, dazzling bright. She stumbled back, shielding her eyes. Relief flooded her chest, hot and overwhelming. Her knees buckled. She dropped to the floor, breath ragged, tears spilling down her face. She was saved, she was. The spotlight shifted. It wasn't searching for her. It was searching for them. Her stomach dropped. The helicopter wasn't rescue. It was reinforcement, enemy reinforcement. She crawled to the doorway, gripping the frame tight, staring out into the storm. Soldiers repelled from the helicopter, dark figures dropping into the snow. More torches flared in the valley as reinforcements surged forward. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Her chest tightened, breath ragged. The outpost wouldn't hold against that. Nothing would. She staggered to her feet, pressing her back against the broken wall. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't survival anymore. This was last stand. She touched the pocket where the photograph lay, feeling the crumpled paper beneath her fingers. Her lips trembled, but her voice came steady, low, almost calm. "Then I burn with it." The storm screamed. The helicopter roared. The valley burned with torches and shadows. And she stood ready. The storm had no mercy left. Snow lashed sideways, a white curtain torn apart by the rotors above. The helicopter's spotlight cut sharp lines through the night, slicing shadows into fragments. Voices rose across the valley, carried by the wind, urgent and unrelenting. She pressed her spine against the fractured wall, closing her eyes for one breath. Just one. Her ribs ached with every inhale, her shoulders sagged, but the beat inside her chest still thudded, stubborn and raw. When she opened her eyes, she lifted the pistol. Only 2 magazines left, not much, barely anything. Her rifle lay discarded on the floor, empty, broken in more ways than one. The pistol felt small in her hand, fragile against the storm pressing in. But it was something. The first shadow leapt from the snow, scrambling over broken sandbags. She fired. The flash lit the storm, carving a brief path through the white. The figure dropped. Another followed, then another. She fired again, until the slide locked back, empty. Her hands shook as she slammed the next magazine in. The snow churned with movement, dark shapes weaving closer. They weren't careless now. They moved with precision, with coordination. She recognized it, soldiers trained, disciplined, reinforcements. The buzzing of drones rose again, circling like vultures. Their faint lights flickered through the haze, taunting. Her throat tightened. She ducked back, chest heaving. Her fingers brushed the photo in her pocket and she whispered through grit teeth, "Just hold, just hold." A flash. The wall to her left exploded inward, concrete shards slicing across her arm. She staggered, cried out, but forced herself upright. Smoke filled the air. Figures poured through the breach, dark silhouettes against flame. She fired wildly. 2 dropped. The rest pressed forward, rifles raised. She stumbled deeper into the outpost, boots crunching over broken glass. Sparks rained from the ceiling, wires hissing above her head. She moved by instinct, memory guiding her through the ruin. The control room door loomed ahead, half shattered, hanging loose. She shoved it closed behind her, wedging a broken beam against the handle. Her chest pounded. The room was dark, lit only by a dying screen flickering static. Shadows of broken machines stretched across the walls. She crouched low, clutching the pistol tight. Muffled voices echoed outside, boots crunching over debris. They were hunting her. Her breathing grew ragged. She closed her eyes again. For a moment, she wasn't in the outpost anymore. She was back at the academy, standing at the range, the weight of instructors' eyes heavy on her back. "You don't belong here," one of them had muttered. "Too soft, too slow." Her jaw tightened. The words clawed at her, but she remembered how she'd raised her rifle that day, how her hands had stopped trembling only when she imagined protecting her sister. Not herself. Her. Always her. The beam at the door rattled. Voices grew sharper. She snapped back to the present, pulse spiking. Her eyes darted to the shadows. The console, the old wiring, the exposed fuel canister tipped against the wall. A choice formed, sharp and dangerous. She could make this place burn, all of it, everyone in it, herself included. Her hand hovered over the canister, trembling. Her breath caught. Her mind screamed at her, not yet, not until there's nothing left. The door cracked open. Boots shoved against the beam, forcing it inch by inch. She raised her pistol, aiming at the gap, waiting. A face appeared. Eyes met hers for one fraction of a heartbeat. Young, barely older than a boy. His rifle lifted, but his eyes faltered, fear flickering there. Hers did too. She fired first. The door burst open fully, the beam clattering aside. Shadows surged through, shouting, firing. Bullets shredded the console, sparks bursting across the room. She dropped low, rolling behind the desk, firing back blind. The storm outside howled through the broken wall. Cold air bit her skin. The world blurred, muzzle flashes, sparks, shouts, snow. Then silence. For one strange moment, silence. She crouched still, breath caught, ears ringing. Smoke curled above the consoles. The shadows were gone. Her finger eased off the trigger. Her chest rose and fell, each inhale sharp and painful. But she wasn't alone. A cough broke the silence. Her eyes darted to the far side of the room. A figure lay there, slumped against the wall, clutching his chest. The same young soldier she had seen, the one whose eyes had flickered with fear. His rifle lay discarded beside him, hand limp. Blood seeped between his fingers. He was fatting. She froze, pistol aimed steady. But he didn't reach for his weapon. He just stared at her, breath shallow, eyes wide. Not with hatred, not with anger, with something closer to regret. Her hand trembled. She could end it, end him. But she didn't. Instead, she lowered the pistol, slowly. He blinked at her, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came, only a soft exhale. Her chest tightened. For one heartbeat, the war vanished. It was just two people in a broken room, both trapped, both dying in their own ways. Then boots thundered again outside, shouts, more coming. She dragged herself upright, pistol raised once more. She backed toward the stairwell, every muscle screaming, but her mind locked on one truth. If she stayed here, she'd be cornered. She stumbled down the stairs into the lower levels of the outpost. The air grew colder, damper, thick with dust. Pipes hissed above her. The hallways were narrow, claustrophobic, shadows stretching long. She pressed her palm against the wall to steady herself, blood dripping from her arm. Each step felt heavier, slower, but she forced her legs to move. The basement storage, the generator room, old, rusted equipment stacked in corners. She knew this place. It had been her hiding spot during her first weeks at the post when she felt invisible, ignored by the others. Down here, she had taught herself to endure silence. Now it would be her last ground. She crouched behind a stack of crates, pistol clutched close. Boots echoed above, then closer down the stairs. Shadows moved in the hallway, lights sweeping across the walls. Her pulse slowed. She breathed in once, steady. They came in pairs, rifles raised, scanning carefully. Professional, methodical. She waited until the first turned his back. One shot, he dropped. The second spun, firing wildly. She ducked, rolled, came up firing. Another shot, another fall. But more followed, too many. Her magazine emptied again. She reloaded slower now, fumbling. Her hands were numb, slick with blood. Her breath rasped, each inhale cut sharp, shallow. And then the click, the last magazine. The truth hit her heavy. This was it, no more after this. Her back pressed against the crates. She closed her eyes. For one moment she saw her sister's face again, bright, laughing, safe. She whispered, voice breaking, I kept it, I kept the flame. The boots thundered closer. She opened her eyes, raised the pistol. And stood. The pistol clattered empty. The sound echoed louder than any gunfire, a hollow click that sealed itself into the silence. She lowered it slowly, breath ragged, sweat freezing against her skin. The storm howled through the cracks of the outpost, filling the silence the weapon left behind. Boots scraped against concrete, shadows pressed closer. They had heard it too. Empty, she had nothing left. Her hands tightened around the useless metal anyway, gripping it like a lifeline. Her eyes darted across the dark storage room. Broken crates, rusted pipes, the dying hum of the generator, nothing more, nothing useful. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. She felt her body swaying, unsteady, the edges of her vision darkening. Her arm throbbed where shrapnel had torn into it, blood still dripping down her sleeve. For one terrifying second she thought of collapsing, just letting the ground catch her, just letting it end. But then she felt the photograph pressed against her chest. She reached into her pocket, pulled it out with trembling hands. The paper was creased, smudged, half torn, but her sister's smile still stared back at her. Young, alive, untouched by war. Her throat tightened. She whispered broken, I promised. Boots thundered closer. Voices barked sharp commands. A light swept across the crates, blinding white. She ducked lower, clutching the photo tight. Her mind screamed at her, no bullets, no chance. Run, hide, burn. And then, strangely, silence again. She blinked into the dark. The storm outside still raged, but the footsteps above had slowed, stopped. She could hear faint shuffling, muffled voices, but they weren't rushing. Why? Her chest heaved. Confusion gnawed at her. Then a different sound reached her ears. A small voice, not sharp, not commanding, fragile, childlike. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't possible, not here, not in this frozen graveyard. But she heard it again, a child's cry, thin, weak, somewhere in the storm above. She pressed a hand against her temple, her head spun. The concussion, the blood loss, hallucinations, it had to be. But the cry came again, clearer now, wailing, afraid. Her breath caught. Memory surged. The night her sister had cried during a thunderstorm, too young to understand the noise, clinging to her blanket while she sat beside her, whispering promises that the world outside couldn't touch them. Her chest burned. The line between memory and reality blurred until she couldn't tell if she was hearing ghosts or truth. But it didn't matter. The sound gave her strength. She pushed herself up, staggering against the crates. Every step felt like knives in her muscles, but she moved, dragging herself toward the stairwell. The light above swung, shadows weaving, voices louder now. She climbed slowly, pistol still clutched though useless. The child's cry rose and fell with the wind, guiding her, pulling her. When she reached the upper floor, the outpost lay in ruins. Walls shattered, flames flickering against the storm. The helicopter still hovered above the valley, a beast of light and shadow. Enemy soldiers moved in the snow, circling, tightening. And there, through the shattered doorway, a figure small and fragile, sitting in the snow. She froze. It wasn't possible. A child, a little girl, no weapon, just trembling, crying, clutching her knees. The enemy soldiers hadn't touched her. They were circling wide, ignoring her, focused only on the outpost. Her vision blurred again. Was it real or her mind breaking? She stepped forward, drawn by something deeper than logic. The snow crunched under her boots. Her breath rose in plumes. The girl lifted her head. For one flickering second, she looked exactly like her sister. Same eyes, same face. Her knees buckled, she nearly collapsed. But the girl's gaze held her steady, silent, waiting. Her throat tightened. She whispered, voice raw, "You're not here, you can't be here." The girl didn't answer, only stared, eyes wide, unblinking. Shouts tore through the storm. The soldiers were closing in, weapons raised. She clenched her fist around the pistol, then dropped it into the snow. Useless, done. Her eyes darted back to the outpost, the fuel canister, the exposed wiring, the place rigged like a grave waiting to be lit. Her chest heaved. She understood now. There was no rescue, no survival. There was only choice. She could let them take it, let them use the outpost, turn its systems against others, or she could end it here with herself inside. The girl's eyes never left hers, silent, demanding an answer. Her hands trembled. She felt the photograph still pressed to her chest, damp with blood. She whispered broken, "I kept it safe. I kept you safe." The storm screamed louder, tearing at her clothes, freezing her skin. The helicopter's spotlight swept across the valley, brighter, blinding. The soldiers shouted again, voices sharp. They were almost on her. Her eyes closed. She saw her sister one last time, laughing in sunlight, untouched, alive. And she knew. She staggered back into the outpost, dragging herself toward the generator room. Every step felt like a farewell. Sparks hissed overhead, wires glowing faint. The fuel canister waited, tipped and trembling. She pressed her hand against it, steadying it. Her breath came shallow. She whispered, soft as prayer, "Then I burn." Her fingers reached for the sparking wires. The storm roared, the helicopter thundered, the soldiers broke into the outpost, boots pounding. And she made her choice. The wires hissed against her fingers. Sparks leapt like fireflies, biting into her skin. The smell of burning insulation filled the room, sharp and acrid. She winced but didn't pull away. The fuel canister trembled where it leaned, the thin metal skin dented, streaked with frost. Just a touch of heat, just one spark, and the outpost would become fire. Boots thundered on the stairs above. Shouts echoed down the halls, closer, sharper. They were almost here. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. The world swayed around her, every edge blurred by blood, loss, exhaustion, pain. But her mind was clearer than it had ever been. This wasn't survival. This was her stand. She glanced at the photograph one last time. Her sister's smile bent and creased but unbroken. She pressed it against her chest, just above her heart, and whispered, "I kept it, I kept you safe." The beam of a flashlight cut into the room. Shadows moved in the doorway, rifles raised. Her hand tightened on the sparking wire. A voice barked in a language she half understood. Orders, a demand to stop. She didn't. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though her eyes burned with tears. The wire met the fuel. The world exploded. Light swallowed everything white, blinding, searing. The roar was deafening, a thunder that tore the air apart. The outpost shuddered, walls ripping open, roof collapsing in fire. Flames surged through the corridors, devouring shadow, steel, stone. The storm outside screamed as the blast punched through it, a wave of fire and snow colliding. The helicopter above reeled, banking hard, its searchlight flickering out. Soldiers in the valley threw themselves into the snow, torches extinguished, shouts lost in the wind. For a heartbeat there was no sound, only light. And in that light she saw her sister. Not broken, not afraid, laughing bright, a face untouched by war. The vision filled her chest with warmth that no storm could freeze. Then the light faded. The outpost collapsed inward, stone and steel folding into itself. Fire rose from the valley, curling into the storm until the snow itself seemed to glow. The ground trembled, then stilled. And silence followed, a silence deeper than the storm. The enemy soldiers rose slowly, staring at the ruin. Their torches lay dark in the snow. The helicopter hovered above, spotlights sweeping the shattered ground, but there was nothing left to find. No survivor, no captive. Only ashes, only fire. One soldier lowered his weapon. His breath fogged the air, uneven, shaken. He muttered something low, almost like a prayer, before turning away. Another knelt in the snow, staring at the flames, his eyes hollow. They had come for victory, but what they found was defiance. High above, the storm began to swallow the fire, snow smothering flames until only smoke rose into the night. The valley grew quiet again, cold, endless. But somewhere in that silence, something remained. Not a body, not a name. A flame, small, unseen, burning in memory. The kind of flame that doesn't ask for glory, doesn't beg for recognition. The kind that burns because it must. The kind that refuses to die. And though the storm howled on, though the valley lay buried in snow and ruin, though the world outside would never know her story, the truth lingered. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The last light had flickered in the outpost. But she became the flame that would not die.